Hello, this is Eric Tinkler here with Not Your Forte podcast, a music education podcast geared towards helping students like you survive and thrive throughout their undergraduate and prepare to go out into the quote-unquote real world. I'm joined by Dr. Philip Payne here.
Hello, how are you?
Head in the music education undergraduate division here at K-State, and like I said, I'm a fourth-year music education student, also at Kansas State University, and we're proud to actually announce a guest star on the podcast.
Woohoo!
Nice.
Thanks for having me on, Eric. Oh, talk about
Yeah,
myself.
talk about
Alright.
yourself a little bit.
Usually
Tell
people
the
don't want me to just talk about
tell the
myself.
listeners a little bit about yourself and everything. And
Well, I am a child of band parents. My parents actually met in the K-State marching band, and so naturally it followed that I would also want to be a band kid. So I started in flute in 5th grade, didn't like it, switched to clarinet because that's what my mom did. Played that for a few years, did oboe, kept breaking reeds, and we know how expensive those are. So my mom made me switch back to clarinet, and then I got to high school, picked up the French horn. My sister played French horn, so I was
pretty
like,
good,
yeah.
pretty good instrument in
Oh,
my,
yeah.
my humble opinion.
And
Second best instrument, but you know.
we can just all agree that brass is the
There we go.
best family.
There we go.
That can be a general consensus here.
Yeah.
Not to push away any of our listeners that might play the woodwinds. It's okay. We accept your apology.
And so I thought my sister would help me learn French horn, and she did not like that idea. So,
Is
but
it
anyway,
younger sister?
my younger sister, and yeah, she quit after high school, so I think I won. Is that how that works?
I think so.
But around the time that I switched to horn, I started dealing with some health issues, coming out of gym class, wheezing and choir, a lot of breathiness in my sound. It became really painful to play instruments. And so I started turning to piano at that point. I did a lot of practicing. I played in a worship band. And so I started noticing patterns in the music I was playing, chord progressions, and I would take those chord progressions and add my own melodies to them. Or I would play an arrangement of a Broadway tune, and I don't like, say I don't like that, what the arranger did here, and I would change the arrangement. And so that's kind of how I started getting into composing. And so I went into composing in my undergraduate here at Kansas State, added horn performance halfway through just because I fell in love with the instrument and the literature. Because horn players, we have the best parts.
Horn.
And not to mention all those solos and orchestral literature. You gotta love that. I graduated from Kansas State a couple years ago and then went on to graduate school at the University of Tennessee for my master's in music composition. One of the things that drew me to the University of Tennessee is they had this really unique program for music theory pedagogy. And so I accepted an assistantship there to teach ear training and music theory, which is why, of course, Eric invited me to be on the podcast today. But I taught ear training and theory there for 2 years, and then a lot of my coursework as part of the music theory pedagogy program was focused on music theory and aural skills pedagogy, as well as a wide variety of analytical techniques and learning styles for a more comprehensive music theory understanding. So I finished that just this last year. And I should mention, as a composer, I really fell in love with the wind band literature. And I think wind band literature is so unique because of the educational nature of it. So due to that fact and just the joy I found teaching music theory, I decided that I wanted to go and get my teaching certification. So that's what I'm doing right now at Kansas State, finishing up some graduate work in music education. So the classes I'm in right now is kind of like a streamlined music education, undergraduate music education with a few graduate courses. And of course, playing wind ensemble with Eric and working with the marching band. And yeah, that's where we are. And
So you talked a little bit about your composer, right? Why don't you tell us just a little bit about your compositions and feel free to just plug them in and tell them where we can find them or listen to them or even purchase them.
Oh yeah. Part of the interesting thing about being a composer right now is developing a brand and a direction, because that's part of the entrepreneurship part of being a millennial and all and all of that. But I mean, it's good for everyone. But I'm kind of focusing on concert band literature right now, but I get really excited about chamber literature. I've got a couple woodwind ensemble things. I think that's a really unique and under composed for ensemble. And right now, I am in the midst of a year-long consortium, I guess. The premiere and everything else was already finished. It was a consortium of 4 female band composers, music written at like a grade 3 level in honor of the 100th year anniversary of the women's suffrage movement. So it's kind of in that effort to help diversify the literature and just bring 4 new pieces. And so right now, my piece is kind of being played at different colleges all over the country. The next performance is a CBDNA performance at the University of Oklahoma later this month. Texas Women's University is doing that, so that's really exciting. And of course, I'm excited to have some ensembles at K-State play my music as well. You can hear my stuff at gracebaughermusic.com. So it's Grace, and then my last name is Baugher, and then music.com. And you can also contact me at that gracebaughermusic@gmail.com if you would like to chat about my music or just want to talk about composition. I would love to do that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. Just a quick question before we kind of dive into the meat of what we're going to talk about with aural skills and everything, something that people are kind of a little scared about in their undergrad, especially early on. Throughout your education experience, do you have a certain teacher who might have been like a huge inspiration from either a music perspective or just in general a life perspective?
I think there are different teachers at different phases of your life that you need. So I remember my junior high band director, Mr. Chappell, was a clarinet player at the time. He kind of gave me the encouragement of like, you're pretty good at this. You should really do something with this, and then would give me like those, nominate me for different bands. And then also my music theory teacher in high school. She's the one that nominated me to do this wonderful opportunity with like the Kansas City Symphony. I worked with Adam Schoenberg for a year. He was the composer in residence and had like my piece played in the Kaufman Center, which is just a gorgeous, gorgeous hall by the Kansas City Symphony. So those are 2 teachers that kind of set me on my path, I would say. And then, of course, Dr. Kerstetter, Eric and I's horn professor, she was just a really great mentor, and I think she offered a lot of playing the horn is difficult because you mess up and miss notes a lot, and so you need a lot of like
every
reassurance that you're not horrible and that this is all normal. And so she was absolutely wonderful during that process. And then my music theory supervisor at Tennessee, Dr. Barbara Murphy, she taught me so much of what I know about pedagogy, music theory, and how students learn, and I'm excited to share some of that, what I learned with you all as well.
So how is it like having gone off to a master's program, and then you're coming back for a teacher certificate right now? How's that experience like in returning to your undergraduate and you're kind of in a weird mix of classes with both graduate students and undergraduate students? How do you adjust to that?
I see, it's really bizarre. So I met Eric when he was a freshman. I was a senior at the time. And so coming back, now he's the senior, and we're in classes together. So that's one part that's bizarre. And like last semester, I was in Fundamentals of Music Education, which is a sophomore level course here, as well as like graduate conducting. So like a 200 level course and an 800 level course. And to be honest, they kind of all require the same amount of work. So it's not so much as a workload shift as it is like a mindset shift. So like with the more advanced courses, it's how deep. It's almost like a maturity thing. Like you've kind of got the fundamentals of everything down so you can start talking about the nuances. And so that has been the more difficult mind shift. But I've also enjoyed, as far as returning to Kansas State, getting to see things from a different perspective. So Dr. Trace, the band director here, has been really generous to allow me to be on staff with the bands, and so I see more of the goings-on behind the scenes rather than being, a section leader band or just a member of the marching band and concert bands. So it's been almost more educational to be a returning student.
To kind of see how things worked, like the inner workings of kind of how things worked. And I'm sure Dr. Payne's teaching some of those classes.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things the question that emerges for me, and I'm sure some of our listeners will engage in these thoughts as well, is sometimes we question, is music ed right for us?
Oh, yeah.
So what drove you to want to look at getting your teaching certificate?
That's a really good question. I think I always, wanted to do it, and it may have just been a stubbornness thing for me because all of my classmates were music education students, and I wanted to be the different one that was getting a composition degree. And I love composition, and I definitely don't regret going that route. But I think, a very practical part of it is a stable income. And I think I can, have no doubt that I can continue to compose and perform while also teaching, and having a steady income can support these other pursuits of mine, but also getting to interact with the students that I would be writing for otherwise. It helps me become a better composer, a better player, and then a better leader, which is another passion. So that was kind of the selfish reasons, and then of course unselfish. When I started seeing those lights going off in my music theory courses, that's I think that's why we all
Right.
want to go down this path.
Well, and I think too, it still provides you that outlet. And I was just having this conversation with our freshmen that you can't allow the students in your ensembles to become your instrument. And so having composition as that musical outlet for you is so critical, so because you can still be the musician who you are and compose, but at the same time be able to allow the students to kind of emerge and figure out who they want to be as a musician without having to, dictate one way or the other which way they go based on your own decisions. So that was really fascinating to me. And then did you ever cross paths with Dr. Stevenson? I don't know if I've ever asked you that before.
I don't know.
He had gone to university. He retired from the University of Oklahoma and then went to UT Knoxville. And I know he was in the theory department. And the reason I ask is because I took his theory pedagogy course.
Yes, his picture is hanging up in our computer lab, and it just stares down at me. And I spend 20 hours a week in that lab, so I know his face very well. Yes.
So he was one of my favorite theory professors while I was working on my doctorate, and I took his theory pedagogy course, his history of tonality. He taught one on Bartok, Prokofiev, and Chicago, and connected all three. He had done one on the theory of rock and roll. So some really interesting approaches, some how to teach theory and aural skills pedagogically. There's some fascinating thoughts, and so I'm excited to jump into this topic.
As a composer, there's so many great composers for educational wind band literature who are teachers first. You have your Robert Sheldons, Richard Saucedo, Randall Standridge, all these great composers for really solid music for all ages. That they do both. They're great teachers too, and I think that's really cool. Before, just one last question. Do you have a composer who's an inspiration to you more than anything, or that you like to try to style after?
I try not to style too much after one composer because I figure if I'm just going to copy someone, there's really no purpose for me to write music. Music like that already exists. But my favorite composer to listen to and just kind of marvel at is John Mackey. And I think the most amazing thing is that he didn't play an instrument when he started composing, so it's all he asks questions and is still growing. You see him posting on social media, asking, can this instrument do this? Can I write that for this grade level? Is this okay? But also, I think it's interesting how he incorporates elements of movie scores and video game scores, or just that sort of feel. And
I would say dance as well. That movement, the dance is, and that's always what was so that stuck out to me when I would chat with him or run across at honor bands and things like that, and to see the progression of his music from beginning until now has been really fascinating as well.
It's so colorful, the way that he uses. That I feel and I don't know exactly how he writes, but when I listen to it, it feels more like sound art.
Yeah,
I'm a composer
you
who's
think
going
a lot
to
image-wise whenever you're playing his pieces. Aurora Awakens is one of my favorite pieces I've performed all time, and it's just there's a lot of imagery that comes in your head when you're playing Mackie.
And he writes it to share, because I'll never forget. It was Turbine. We were at that point we were putting together our show. I'm trying to remember what year it is now, probably 2006, 2007. And we had gone through some copyright issues, trying to figure out how to get a show together. And we came across Turbine, and we were like, I wonder if he'd let us arrange it for marching. And within minutes, he was like, yeah, do it. So him wanting to share, I mean, that's a huge, thing for, I think, composers just wanting their music to be heard and to have that public exposure, because it's so much a part of, like you were mentioning earlier, the brand and all that. So.
All right, let's dive into the meat of the topic a little bit. You guys probably know by the title of the episode, but Aural Skills. This is something that everyone absolutely loves, their favorite thing to do in the morning. I mean, I know at K-State it's an early morning class. There's no better way to start the morning. I'm lying a lot right now. But honestly, Aural Skills is perhaps one of the most important things that you do in your early years of your undergrad in terms of developing your ideas behind how to teach music, how to best understand your students, and just develop overall your musicality and your own kind of work ethic, I believe. So Grace, you've been both a student and you taught Aural Skills at Tennessee, right?
Yeah, I did.
What's kind of things that you noticed both as a student and as a teacher that we really struggle at?
Yeah, I'll just say first that I was one of those students that actually did not have issues with ear training when I was going through. It came very natural to me as a composer and horn player. That's something that was just ingrained to me from the beginning. So making that transition to teacher, I really had to break it down. Like, how do I think about this, and how do I make sense of it? So I would say the first thing I noticed is that you have to make the connection between music theory and aural skills. Aural skills is what we do with music. Music theory is what informs aural skills. That's one way to think about it. It's how your mind makes sense of what you're hearing. There are, of course, exceptions when it's like music written, for intellectually.
Always exceptions.
But that's kind of how I would think about it. And the second one is making sure that it's relevant to what you're doing. As much as I love the Oppman, which is what we use at Kansas State as well as what we used at Tennessee, nobody knows those songs in there. And after you sight read them, they never come up again. So, doing things like, when we would put things like, hey, here's the K-State alma mater. It would almost be more overwhelming because they're thinking of it more as a phrase, because that's how they know it from marching band, rather than, vertically every single note. What's this interval? What's this interval? Which, of course, leads me to the next one, which is everyone thinks so vertically. In ensembles, we talk about horizontal, movement and musicality. But when we get to aural skills, we're just thinking one chord at a time, one note at a time, one measure at a time. And that's where a lot of students get tripped up.
So, Dr. Payne, as having been an educator out in the field for quite some time, how often do you think you use your aural skills?
Oh, you use them every day, all the time. And I think from various points, right? So if you're in an ensemble, you're listening for right pitch, right rhythm, being able to know melody, counter melody, being able to point these things out when you hear something. If you don't know it's wrong, and what is on the page, you have to be able. And this is the statement that I'll make with aural skills that I think will carry through, is that as a music teacher and as a performer, I would argue, you have to bring meaning to what you see on the page rather than trying to extract meaning from it. And what I mean by that is that when we're looking at a score as a teacher, we need to be able to hear what that sounds like, and so I'll never forget sitting in a conducting lesson, and my conducting professor, Dr. Wakefield, he'd come in, we'd start the lesson, he'd be like, all right, sing me the third clarinet part this morning. and you better be able to start just going to town on it. And he was like, well, that's great. Now switch to the second bassoon. And so this idea of you really have to have an aural picture of what it is that you're seeing, and be able to hear the music just from what you're looking at. And the only way you can do that is to create these sound concepts in your head. And so, being able to sing, being able to know what something sounds like before you actually hear it, that is so critical. Now, my question then to Grace is, when did you notice that it did come to you naturally, that these aural skills came to you naturally?
As I mentioned before, like as I was arranging, even before that, listening in choir class in middle school and hearing the wrong pitch from another section, or sitting, as a horn player, sitting, next to another horn player who didn't have the right hand position and therefore was really flat. Things like that. Those are aural skills and error detection.
So then it becomes like this scavenger hunt, right? We've got to figure out, where does that happen, because those aren't necessarily innate skills. You're not necessarily born with those, So how do those develop? And so I think tracing it back and since this is a music ed podcast, part of our issue, if you're struggling with aural skills, you've got to go back and look at what's the source of that struggle. Where is it that, because I know, having worked with some of our students on aural skills proficiency, sometimes their error detection is great, but their ability to sing what they're seeing isn't always spot on, and it's because they have a pitch matching issue, and so it's a vocal or singing issue, as opposed to the ability to know what it sounds like.
Yeah, which is something that I struggled with. Is I have a decent idea of kind of where the pitches are and everything. Like especially as a horn player, I can audiate it in my head, but I struggle with the more vocal technique aspect of it, because I haven't sang in a choir ever. The last time I sang in a class would have been 5th grade with just general music, and that's a lot of people who haven't sung in a choir before or anything. It's sometimes the vocal techniques behind the aural skills.
And I would say, for each one of us, we have to really trace it back, right? And figure out, because my daughters, their aural skills are already fairly advanced, but it was because, as a kid, we would sing songs to them, but I would never sing it the same way twice, so like they can't sing or hum Twinkle Twinkle Little Star correctly. For whatever correctly is worth, but they always change it up. They'll change the words up. They'll change the melody up. They'll change the ending, and so then they'll just sit there and they'll try things out, and their pitch, their ability, and it drives my oldest nuts. It's the same way. She'll be sitting in a section and she'll be like, "Man, you are so flat." But she doesn't say anything, but it drives her nuts, and she can it grates on her, because she can hear it, and she knows where the problem is. But as a member of the section, just don't walk over and go, well,
hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
You're not going to make many friends that way.
But it's the same way with the internal sense of pitch. If parents are singing to them on a regular basis, that's why my biggest thing is trace it back and figure out where those gaps in your knowledge are, and where did you acquire these skills, because at some point we're going to have to take our students back, and we're going to have to trace back to the source of where are they at developmentally, and then build them back up from there.
I think you touched on something really important. Aural skills is just that. It's a skill. It's probably more like your private lesson than it is music theory. And the issue is when students try to treat it like a theory course and cram for the test the night before. It's kind of like, deciding I'm going to run a 5K the next morning when you haven't ran since high school,
Right.
So it's just, it's not going to work. So it's a daily thing. You have to work on developing that ear every day and singing every day, even if it's just in the shower.
And this kind of just leads into talking about ways in which you can improve your aural skills. I personally know I've had a lot of struggles early on in Aural Skills. I know a lot of my fellow peers who have complained endlessly about it. But the thing that I learned after kind of the first semester of Aural Skills, it's like what Grace said, it needs to be a practice skilled. When it came to sight singing, I knew just because I'm not a great singer, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna actually have to practice being able to sing in tune. I can sing and identify these intervals in my head, but I'm actually gonna have to practice. I'm gonna have to get comfortable with solfege. I'm going to have to work on listening, just using whatever websites and stuff, or having friends play something for me and me try to dictate it. So it's constantly something that you're going to need to work on.
Let's talk about solfege for just a minute.
Learn solfege. Solfege is so vitally important to passing Aural Skills. If you don't do it, you'll make your life so much more difficult, as both, whether you're teaching band, choir, whatever you're doing, whatever in music, learn your solfege. This is a rant.
Okay, so let's talk about solfege for a minute, because I think sometimes we can apply. Number one, yes, I believe it's important, but sometimes we can attach too much value to it, and it becomes more of a hindrance as opposed to something that can help us. So it depends on how we introduce it, how we interact with it. Do you want to talk a little bit about solfege?
I told you before, I kind of had to relearn Aural Skills when I started teaching it, and I figured out the key is not learning solfege's scale degrees, but going back to tonic, dominant, predominant, leading tone. What is the function of the notes in the scale? That is the key. So you can use tonic and dominant as your pillars. If you can find tonic and dominant in your sight singing or your dictation, you're good. Next, add leading tone. That has, it's got baggage. Seven's got to resolve certain ways. And so thinking back to your music theory is what do I know about, is a seven going to have to resolve up, things like that. So learning your scale degrees and how they function within a scale, that is probably more important than remembering the order of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So if you need to kind of step back into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 until you can kind of get a grasp of how you can, or getting comfortable with singing in tune and in tone, within the tonality of the scale, and then adding solfege back.
And for me, the concept and stuff, I think about the importance of learning solfege, especially in your Aural Skills. It's the relative idea of do to sol is always going to be do to sol, and like what Grace said, just finding your pillars and stuff like that, knowing your tonic dominant relationship and everything, because you're never gonna perfectly sight sing. But being able, it's all about kind of that quick recovery and being able to be like, okay, I got off, but I'm right back. This is tonic. I know where tonic is. I'm solid right here.
And that tonicization is huge, right? And so, and one thing to remind our listeners too is that solfege is a language, right? And so when we add the layer of language on top of also having to figure out melody, counter melody, harmony, all of that, we have to keep in mind that because we're labeling it, we're adding a layer, which makes it a little more complex. So when you go in and practice with a piano, or your instrument, have some way to have an aural concept of what it's going to sound like, and then sing it back. And then eventually, once you get that insight, then you can add those layer of solfege. But practicing solfege every day, that's going to be important so that you can do it without thinking. Leading tone, Grace mentioned the leading tone. That's huge. A lot of times what ends up happening in Aural Skills is that, let's just say we want to do do, mi, so. Do, mi, so, mi, do. Well, there's a problem with that, right? Because we don't know what do is. Because we could have just sang the 4 chord because we're missing the leading tone, right? So whenever you go through this process of trying to anchor do as your tonic, then you want to make sure that you add that leading tone. Do, do, there we are. See? Right there. Do, mi, so, mi, do, ti, do. And that leading tone anchors it in, just like Grace was mentioning earlier. There's only one place for that T to go, and that's right back into do. And so once you do that, then your ear automatically hears.
And composers use that same technique when they're establishing, when you study modulation, you're looking for 5-1, scale degree 7 is in there. So this is something that you know instinctually from all of the music you listen to. It's just putting a name to the sound.
So going on, we've touched a lot on sight singing. How about the other aspect of your aural skills class, like melodic, harmonic dictation,
Yes.
chord identification, everything? What's kind of advice or ways we can improve on that?
Get the fundamentals as quickly as you can. Intervals, especially intervals and chord qualities. If you can get those, if you can get comfortable with those, once they're introduced, then it's going to make the rest of your aural skills journey a lot easier, because everything is based off of that.
And I know there's tons of great websites out there now to where you can practice interval identification, chord identification, even melodic and harmonic dictation. I think off the top of my head, I can think of musictheory.net, Teoria. Those are a couple of websites which are free to use that you can just pull up on your computer, plug in some headphones, and work on those skills.
Right, and something I would encourage people to do if they're going to practice intervals is not just thinking of them as, okay, this note to this note is this interval. Try to think of it within the scale. You know, thinking of re to fa, that's a minor third. Just the way that we think of sol to do, as in, as a perfect fourth, sol up to do.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. That's going to be a lot more helpful once you start doing melodic dictation than Here Comes the Bride.
It was much like we talked about in Jazz Tech the other day about your Dorian matching up with the minor 2/7 chord.
Mm-hmm.
And your Mixolydian matching up with the dominant 7 chord, because the notes literally are the scale. The Mixolydian mode is nothing more than your dominant 7 chord with passing tones. And so if we understand that that's how it all works, one suggestion that I would give, and this goes back to what Grace was mentioning earlier, that a lot of times we try and extract old tunes and we try and do all of these really difficult whether it be dictations, harmonic, melodic, rhythmic, whatever. Sit down while you're just listening to the radio and try and transcribe what you're hearing.
Yeah, that
Exactly.
Some of my favorite. In my second semester of Aural Skills, it was taught by Dr. Morris. She was a guest on the podcast last semester. One thing she did that really helped melodic dictation click in my head is she assigned transcription projects. She would be like, okay, we're going to do pop tunes and stuff like that this time. She would give a suggested list, but she's like, you can choose any song that you want to. Just figure out the melody and write down an 16 bars or whatever. And doing that one, it was a lot more enjoyable than just some random melody on the piano. And it's just it's a more applicable skill of melodic dictation.
Oh, yeah, and you don't even have to take separate time. Be like, I'm going to take 15 minutes and try to transcribe this. You could sit down in the practice room when you're practicing your instrument and try to play that melody on your instrument with the track.
Yeah.
I mean, all of a sudden you're practicing your instrument and getting really good at.
And it's
Yeah.
I personally do that a ton in my practice sessions now. I'll have some music on, and then I'll try to figure out the melody, try to figure out the chord progression and everything. Because that's one, it's just kind of fun to be able to play the melodies to like some of your favorite tunes and things like that. I think the other day I had Lord of the Rings pulled up, and I was just like, all right, we're just gonna play through this and figure it out. And it's just
Now, which Lord of the Rings did you have pulled up?
It was the tune was concerning hobbits.
Okay, so you're not talking about the Johann de Mesch.
No.
Okay, that's a great piece
Oh, so
too.
both are excellent.
Yeah.
But then the other one, the harmonic dictation, which is another animal entirely. So this is where it actually behooves you to think horizontally. Something that my supervisor suggested to me is thinking about chords and their function. So a 1 and a 6 chord have a tonic function. A 5 and 7, and I would also add a 1, 6, 4, have a dominant function, and then 2, 4 have a predominant function. And usually we don't see 3 chords, so they kind of fit dominant, they kind of fit tonic, but we don't talk about those. And so you can kind of, cadences are great examples. 4, 5, 1, predominant, dominant, tonic. If you can start recognizing the motion of the chords, you can narrow it down from there, figure out what's going on in the bass. It's kind of a selection process, crossing off options, if that's the way you think.
Okay. So let's go on. It's the end of the semester. I'm a student. I'm getting ready to let's start. I'm getting ready to go into my sight singing. What's something that a student can do, like right before their sight singing and going into their sight singing, that will just help them prepare them to be successful?
If they're worried about it like 30 minutes before, it's too late. The day before, it's too late. That's something that has to be done like every day. You need to set aside. And this isn't something where you have to set aside like an hour a day. I'm talking about when you wake up in the morning and you're getting ready, do some vocalizing. Do some just simple, tonic dominant relationships. Bum, 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 bum.
Singing in the shower, like Grace was talking about.
Right. And just figuring out, all right, so tonic dominant, that's what I'm going to focus on today. And just doing like 2 and 3 note patterns so that you can hear this movement of tonic to dominant. Then you can add the predominant or subdominant in there, but sing every single day. And then, work out, like, even if it's just 4 bars of a song that you heard on the radio on the way into school one day. And you just say, all right, 4 bars today, I'm going to try and sing that back. I'm going to try and write it out in solfege. Just 4 bars. And like literally 10 minutes a day. If you do just 10 minutes a day and then you sing it, you're done, then that's going to pay off a whole lot more dividends.
And maximize the warm-up. That's one thing I feel like most students don't do at all.
Yeah, that's just what I was about to suggest. Keep a level head when you go into these things, and if you've prepared correctly, you shouldn't need to be worried. But, if you establish the key, and then look at the time signature. Time signature is important. And then look for the hard spots. If you don't want to start at the beginning and then run out of time only to realize the second to last measure of the sight singing example is the hardest one. So definitely look for those challenging aspects. And the other thing is don't forget about the rhythm. So many of the students who came into my sight singing exams were so focused on hitting those pitches that they forgot about the rhythm. And the way I graded was 50% of the points was for pitch accuracy and 50% was for rhythm. And so they would lose a lot of points there. And my guess is a lot of, your teachers will grade similarly. That rhythm will have some sort of significant points. So don't forget about the rhythm.
And that brings up another point, rhythmic solfege. Almost exactly the same. Having counting system. It doesn't matter whether you use Takadimi, Kodai with the TT, ta-ta-T, it doesn't, or ta-ta, ti-ti-ta, or if you're using Eastman, modified Eastman, it really doesn't matter which one you do, but be consistent and make sure that you are focused on being able to ground yourself, because that pulse is critical. Because if you don't play, if it's wrong rhythms, it's still wrong.
Right. And imagine going into ensemble in band. It's kind of forgivable to play the wrong pitch, but if you don't play the right rhythm, all of a sudden you're nowhere near where the rest of the ensemble is.
So spending some time, and this goes back to when you get back into the practice room and you're warming up. Have these be part of your warm-up ritual. Count a little bit each day. Sing a little bit each day. See if you can sing a melody and then play it back on your instrument. See if you can sing a melody, play it on your instrument, then write it down. Give yourself little quizzes each day, and that's going to be more than... And it's going to pay dividends, right? So you might hear something like really cool, and then if you're in a jazz ensemble, you may want to quote that in the middle of one of your solos. And people will go, oh, that was really cool. It's really funny to me, one of the most overused lines in a lot of film scoring, I don't know if you hear this a lot, but the Dies Irae theme. All the time, and it's like every time it pops out, it's like one of those fingernails on chalkboard to me, because I love it. It's awesome, but it's like, okay, sometimes it can become cliche. And I'm like, wait a second, because you hear the dee dum dum dum, and you're like, okay, I see why you did that there. I appreciate it. It's awesome. But it's also one of those things, if you don't know, it sounds really cool. But why does it sound cool? What is that theme? You know, and so if you're wanting to put something in that will just be like, for instance, I was playing a concert. Where were we? Oh, we were at Oklahoma State, and we were at a jazz festival, I think it was Oklahoma State. Anyway, no, I don't remember. It was a team that I was playing and soloing with, I think it was the trombone choir. And we had just beaten somebody, OU, that is. And so I threw Boomer Sooner into my solo. And they all picked up on it. It was so awesome. But you just don't know when that's going to happen. But it's clever, right? But without Aural Skills, you can't just pick up a tune and say, all right, let's have a little bit of fun.
So just kind of wrapping up everything, and something that you'll hear from any musician, any teacher, you got to practice it. You just got to practice it. It's a skill. It's an aural skill, like what Grace said, that you got to work on. But we're going to go ahead and wrap up now. Grace, thank you so much for being such just a great and willing guest on this podcast. We truly appreciate it. I'm sure our listeners truly appreciate listening to your insight. Don't forget to check out her stuff. I've listened to some of her compositions. It's absolutely phenomenal, and she's already growing so big in terms of her brand and everything. And having known her for so long, it's super cool to see a close friend like that succeed in the area in which she's enjoying. But Dr. Payne, you want to take us out?
Absolutely. Rate us 5 stars so that you can find us. We can't wait to get back to here in 2 weeks so that we can chat a little bit more. What are we talking about next time?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but all posts are not.
Yeah, I can guarantee it's going to be amazing. So rate us 5 stars. Find us at all places podcasts. So that's going to be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Check us out on our YouTube channel, Not Your Forte Podcast. Send us your questions, and we will talk to you next time.